Good evening. My name is Karen Clymer. I'm from Elgin First Assembly of God, Elgin, Oklahoma. I have had quite a day. Today, my husband and I celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary, this wonderful golden anniversary, and they had our church had quite an event for us, and we appreciate it very much. So I have had quite a bit of cake and candy and fruit, so I may be a little hyper. I'm already a hyper anyway, so maybe worse. So we'll do our best to get through this without too much craziness. We are located at 921 3rd Street, Elgin, Oklahoma. If you do not have a church home, we welcome you to attend. If you're visiting in the area, we'd love to have you. We begin services at 9:45 a.m. for Sunday school. We have classes for all ages. And also then we have a very special speaker to be with us, Reverend Dr. Adonna Otwell from Waxahachie, Texas. She teaches at Nelson University and has for many years. A wonderful woman of God. You would love her ministry, so we hope that you will be able to be with us if you do not have a church home. Okay, so the title of our lesson is Jethro, Moses' Counselor and Father-in-Law. So we're trusting the Lord to help us with this lesson and guide us, and there's just so many great truths in this lesson. I've enjoyed it so much. You know, you look at somebody like we think of Moses and what a great man that he was, how God used him, but you look at where he started from, and you look at all the opposition that he had against him. It looked like everything was against him, but God had a plan. Satan was fighting him every way that he could to defeat him, but God had a plan, and you can't stop God. And how God used him, and it helped us to see also that when we feel so insignificant, and how, or maybe we just couldn't possibly do what God wants us to do, God will teach us and train us and help us. And that's the best thing, is just to say, yes, Lord. When he taps us to do something, just turn it over with the Lord. All right, so 10:45 is our worship service with Sister Donna Otwell. We're hopeful that you can come. As I said, we want to keep reminding you of this. We just appreciate so much that she's willing to come. I thought during the school year and being so busy, but she graciously told her pastor she would love to come. Also, I have a friend that is visiting, also Sister Frida Bryant. But anyway, it's going to be a great time. We've had friends today that was in. I had a friend that came in from eastern Arkansas with a friend of hers. We just had family. It was just a wonderful time. The church did this for us, and I've been overwhelmed. I just appreciate the Lord and His greatness. I thank the Lord for my husband. Thank the Lord that He brought us together. He had a plan. You just follow Him. You can't lose. You always win when you honor God. All right, so Jethro, Moses' counselor and father-in-law. You know, sometimes when you're going through a situation that may be really difficult, and you're trying to make decisions, and sometimes it just becomes overwhelming. And it's a wonderful thing when you have somebody that is on the outside looking in, and they're a good person. They've got, they're not a person wanting to boss you around. They're not going to tell you what to do and how to do, but they can offer sometimes such sage advice. People that are not closely connected, they're not carrying maybe the burdens that you are, and all of the things, the ramifications you're thinking of and all. They can see things that we don't see, and especially if they are an older person that has been through a number of situations in life. They've seen so many things, experienced so many things, and maybe helped others, and they're able to help us to see things more clearly, to give us some good advice, and I appreciate that so much. I remember a couple that I knew that got involved with another couple. They decided they'd go together and have a business together. And I've heard many times that getting a partner is very important, because things can happen. You need to make sure that you're choosing the right partner to go into business with. Well, it didn't work out really well, and so they thought, this one couple, the way they'd been beat out of the money, they said we're going to take them to court, and we're going to this and that and all. They were very young. They were just out of had been in the military. Had been in for, I think, maybe like just 4 years or whatever. But so they had plans to just take over and just going to really take that to court, and they were just all upset with it. And one of them had a person on the outside that could see this thing, was much older and wiser, had seen a lot of situations, and told them, you know what, rather than get entangled in all of that, the best thing for you to do is just call it, it's a lesson learned, and move on. And that's what they did, and I'm glad I think that was actually the wise thing to do. Said, have you ever found yourself in a situation where things kept going wrong even though you thought you were following God? Moses knew what it was like to be overwhelmed like this. Just like us, he needed advice, encouragement, and support. And I want to say along with this that, sometimes people will say, well, if that person was in the will of God, they wouldn't be having all of these problems. That, it would be smooth. That isn't always the case. And some people will say, well, if you're in the will of God, Satan is going to fight you and you're going to have problems. That can happen too. So the thing, we need to be prepared, and the Lord is going to help us. Yes, whatever we're doing, oftentimes the devil he'll put something in your way, or someone in your way that can say, well, I don't think if you should do it. Well, you wouldn't be going through all of this if you were in the will of God. So here's what you need to do. It's time to back away from a person like that. I would say, listen, I'm going to go along, get along with God. I'm going to seek the Lord, and God will oftentimes bring somebody into your path. Some way your paths will cross that will help you. And God can speak to our hearts and give us a word from his word. I believe that with all of my heart. I've had it happen. Our central truth today is value God, honoring relationships, and listen to wise counsel. And our key verse today is Exodus 18:24. We'll read it first in the King James Version and then in the New Living Translation. So Moses hearkened to the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he had said. And in the New Living Translation, Moses listened to his father-in-law's advice and followed his suggestions. Our learning objectives tonight are: we will recognize the dangers of rash actions. 2, we will learn the value of seeking wise counsel and how it leads to success in God's service. 3, we will accept and seek wise counsel instead of rejecting or feeling threatened by it. It's one thing to seek out and believe God to give you direction and help in situations like this. You can find safety in it. Who do you reach out to? I'm careful who I reach out to. You just, as you seek God, like I said, God can bring people into your path. What are some examples of good advice you have received? I can think of. Well, one thing first that I would say before this that I really want to talk about, I'd like to say this to people, is that the danger of sowing wild oats. I've heard people say this, well, you just got to sow your wild oats. And that's one of the most foolish things you could ever tell a person. Well, they just got to sow their wild oats. That is not true. You do not have to do that. Give your life to the Lord. Never in God's word does he tell you to sow the wild oats. You have to reap those. The thing of it is well, I'm going to get saved and they'll all go away. No, when you planted those seeds, they're going to come up, and it can actually be something that can torment you all of your life. Even though you may come to the Lord, you have those things that you'll have to deal with. You have the memories of them that, yes, you can be saved and forgiven, but the thing is, just steer clear of that. And then I would ask this question. The Lord really helped me with this one time. A young lady, I wanted to help. She was smoking, just very young, and I was encouraging her to. And I asked, Lord, how do I pray for this girl? And the Lord spoke to my heart and said, what are the benefits of smoking? And so here, I would say, what are the benefits of sowing wild oats? There are no benefits of sowing wild oats. Live for Jesus. Live for Jesus. That's what we need to do. The book of Proverbs tells us if you reject discipline, you only harm yourself. But if you listen to correction, you grow in understanding. That's Proverbs 15:32. What great, great words there. If you reject discipline, you only harm yourself. But if you listen to correction, you grow in understanding. And sometimes a person, they maybe want to do something so badly, and somebody will give them advice that God will actually put into their path maybe. And they will give some very good advice, sound biblical advice, but they don't want to do it. They want it to be their way. The best thing to do is to humble our hearts and do it God's way. God has brought somebody into our life to help us accept it. So I love it. It's very important who we seek out. You can look for somebody that believes what you believe and just will go along with you. We have to be careful. We want to make sure who we reach out to, be very cautious, the people that we choose to help. I want to reach out to somebody that I know they pray and believe and they live a life holy before the Lord. So Moses was called to deliver God's people from slavery in Egypt, but after killing an Egyptian official, we've studied this in an earlier lesson, he was fleeing from Pharaoh. He had become an exile in the wilderness. He was a man that he was hunted. It was a miserable situation. He desperately needed a wise counselor. And in our lesson today, we find out God directed him And we said our lesson, one of the key events in Moses' life was being able to see things life through the lens of his father-in-law Jethro, also called Reuel. And so he joins the narrative first as an outside witness of God's miraculous deliverance. Then he moves into the role of counselor during a critical time in Moses' time of leadership even. Jethro, in part one of our lessons, Jethro provides sanctuary for Moses. So Moses had grown up in the Egyptian court. He recognized the Israelite slaves were his own people. We've mentioned this before. Well, how did he know? I personally believe that his mother, that was actually the one that was raising him, even though he had become the son of the Egyptian princess, and that she had asked, and remember how that the Lord had made a way that the sister of Moses had been right there and said, "Oh, do you need someone to nurse that baby? I know someone." Well, it turned out to be, she took it to their mother, Moses and her mother. And I firmly believe, as one pastor I had, that believes that she told him. She somehow, God helped her as she whispered that into his ear time and again. "Moses, you're not an Egyptian. Moses, you are an Israelite. You are an Israelite." That is firm. That's what I believe. Well, I don't know, whatever it is, I know that God did direct, and he did know at some point. This choice now, that here he was, and here is the case where he recognized, he knew there came a time, said, when he recognized, and he realized, I am an Israelite. I am not an Egyptian. But though he had been trained there, he knew all the correct things to say and to do. That was wonderful. He learned their customs and all. God was using him. It was part of his skill set now, that the Lord was going to change into giving more things. The phrase "his brethren" is repeated twice in Exodus 2:11 to emphasize Moses' connection with the Israelites. And when he stepped in one time, and some people feel like he was acting rashly, some people found he was righteously, when he intervened in a fight between two Israelite men. And people say, well, one said he did wrong, some said he did right. Well, then with the aggressor attempting to deflect attention from his own wrongdoing, pointed to Moses, how often do we dismiss other people's criticism with a quick retort with our own shortcomings? The aggressor attempting to deflect attention from his own wrongdoing. Moses was there to step up, and he intervened in a fight between two Israelites, when one of whom was really in the wrong. But one thing you can see about Moses, he wanted right to be done. He wasn't going to sit back and think, well, maybe he was impetuous, he shouldn't have done what he did. But the Lord is going to help him. He's going to train him. He's going to groom him. There's things the Lord has to help us with. And all of us, he does that. And you can look back on your own life, and you can think of, I look back now and I think, well, that was really foolish things, how I thought and how I processed that particular thing or something. I think, thank you, Lord, that I realize I've grown. We sometimes feel like we haven't grown. I know this, that God's eye is on us, and he's there to help us. When we make a mistake, he is not there to push us down. Now, he will convict us. But why? To draw us to him, and that we will come to him, and he will forgive us and help us to do the right thing. With his leadership rejected and a death sentence hanging over his head, he became an exile from his former home in the Egyptian palace. You think about that, from the palace now. He's running. He's a fugitive. He knows they're after him. Pharaoh has found out what he has done. He is in danger, but God's eye was on him. He was God's man. So when you feel like, I've done something so terrible, there is no way God would ever forgive me, can ever use me. He can. We ask God to forgive us, and when conviction comes, that is the Lord drawing us to himself. He's not condemning us, he's drawing us to himself. So that's when God now stepped in. When here Moses felt like he was probably at the lowest point in his life. How could he ever win? He was a fugitive. But here he was, been in the palace. He was raised here by this princess in Egypt, and now here he is. He's running for his life. Moses' choices removed him from his position of influence and seemed to limit his ability to help his fellow Israelites. Our writer says he was exiled in Midian. He couldn't advocate for them from within the Egyptian government. He could not even visit them any longer. At this low point in Moses' life, listen to this, God stepped in. Connected him with a wise leader named Jethro. And with his support, the next phase of Moses' life was about to begin. So fleeing Egypt, Moses ended up in Midian. The Midianites are thought to be by some to be semi-nomadic, people who were descendants of Abraham and his wife Keturah. the descendants of Moses' time with the Midianites is twofold. This brings out to how God is training him. Number one, Moses' new station. The man that was raised in a palace became a hired shepherd tending someone else's flock. He lost his position, but his new occupation also was considered shameful in the Egyptian culture in which he was raised. It was just awful that here he was. Now, he was tending what? He's out there. This is a terrible thing. He's a shepherd. No one wants to do. Why? All of his position was gone. His authority that he had, it was gone. And now he's in a new location. Everything has changed. He's no longer a city dweller. He was now part of a tribe, our writer brings out. He would have spent most of his days outdoors, in all kinds of weather, fending off wild animals and hunting for good grazing land. And it's been brought out how people, the Lord said, all we like sheep. We've gone astray and we've turned to our own way. And sheep have to have a shepherd. And so he was going to be here with these, later on, we'll find out the Lord was going to use him to lead the children of Israel, to lead them out of Egypt's bondage. And he was getting some good training here. That's what the Lord is training him. And it looked like he was going backward. He was not. The Lord was teaching him and training him, and he was preparing him so he would be ready. So the Lord always, he equips us when he sends us out, and he that's what he does. He strategically places us. He's got a plan for us, and he primes us, and he equips us for service. So God was expanding Moses' skill set. A skill set is important. We've talked about that before. Everyone has a skill set. I don't have any skills. Oh, yes, we do. We all have a skill set. But he wanted to equip him with more. So here was Moses knew this, what it was to be. He knew all about the culture of Egypt because he had lived there. So he was well versed on all of that. But he's learning another side over here. He was going to need to be equipped to lead the Israelites out of Egypt at the right time. You couldn't just do it, just jump in and do it now. Instead, during this precarious and vulnerable time in Moses' life, the high priest of Midian provided him with shelter, a wife, a home, and an essential education in wilderness living. He tells, we find out that Jethro was the priest of Midian, had 7 daughters, and so we don't know a whole lot about him. But anyway, we're going to talk about now when, in characteristic role as deliverer, Moses fought off the shepherds who were blocking Jethro's daughters from watering their flocks. He was a man he recognized wrong, and he wanted to right the wrongs. And say maybe he's just too impetuous. We saw something needed to be done, and there was nobody else there to do it. He didn't see anybody that was defending those ladies, and so he stepped in. He was said this time he was successful in bringing about justice. But here he was ready to help, and he did help those young women. He made sure that they were able to get their flocks watered, and when they got home, and the father said, well, how did you get back here so soon? And they said, well, we had all these others fellas, they come in and they wouldn't let us water and all, and so there was this Egyptian man, said he come up, and he probably said perhaps due to his language or something, or with accent, they recognized that he was an Egyptian, and they said, well, this Egyptian helped us, and said, so Jethro said in characteristic Near Eastern pattern of speech with repeated questions ended with the hospitable invitation. Then where is he? Why did you leave him there? Invite him to come and eat with us. So the dialogue allows the reader to feel the animation, excitement of the moment. And so what did they do? They were able to get him, bring him in. Here God, it wasn't just any person, it was daughters. It was the particular person, the Lord, their father, that was going to be particular help to him. And it goes on to say Moses' deliverance of the Israelites had been delayed, but as one scholar aptly points, God is never in any great hurry. I like this. God does not rush, he prepares. God does not rush, he prepares. So he can put things on hold for a little while. Why? So we learn, he teaches and trains us. And he's so ready to help us. He wants us to be prepared to do the job. That's why it's so important that we respond, yes, Lord, when he speaks to us. And the devil will often tell me, well, you're just you're being a smart aleck. Well, no, and really what that comes from, the devil will take something good and try to twist it around to evil. My dad always told us nobody likes a smart aleck. And that's true. And so he always wanted us to be careful. Don't be a smart aleck. So anytime when sometimes the Lord will speak to me to do something and I'm prepared to do it, and I don't hear voices and all, but the Lord impresses things on my heart, and immediately when I'm ready to do it, that's what the devil will almost always tell me, you're just trying to be a smart aleck. No, I'm not. And just, I'm listening to the Lord. Satan, get behind me. The Lord rebuke you. I'm working for the Lord. He said God is never in a hurry to prepare his servants to do his will, especially when he has some great work for them to accomplish. God wants us to be poised. He wants, and I'm speaking in terms of this position, the job you have, what the Lord wants you to do, and that he's trained you. Your first day in a training, you're not real comfortable. The second day you're not. But the Lord wants us, when he begins training us, and he doesn't say, okay, I'm training you today. But we recognize when we're having to learn something, the Lord is teaching us something different and all. And it's like on any job, something that at first you thought, I'll never get this. But after a while, it's comfortable, and you thought, how is this hard to me? There's nothing to this. I can do this. Well, the Lord wants us to be, actually, when we come to the point that we are poised, we're not worried that we can do this. We know that we can, not because we're arrogant, but because we've been trained and we've done it for a while, and so we know what it is. This is what the Lord helps us, and to where we can be poised. And then the Lord was preparing him. The Lord gave me these words a while back, and poised, and this in a few minutes, and just I was a few minutes, it was just a few seconds, and to be prepared, and then to be positioned. Poised, prepared, positioned. I was thinking of poised of being poised and waiting, like waiting and just being prepared. Because I thought that'd be kind of nerve-wracking, but when I begin to look that up, and poised, sometimes it's when you know something, you know how to do it, you're poised. You're not worried, you're not nervous, you're ready because you're prepared, and you're poised, you're at ease, poised, and then you're prepared. And so he's going to be able to accomplish what the Lord wants him to do because he's teaching him. God does not rush; he prepares. That's what I like. And the thing it is, we don't want people that stick our feet in the ground, or we begin to say, well, I'm afraid I would say the wrong thing. I've heard that till I'm absolutely, the devil will use that on people, and they will say, well, I'm afraid I'll say the wrong thing. And I tell people, then you probably won't, because you are being conscientious about that, and you're praying and believing the Lord will help us. And he just will. He does. Let's just be at rest with that. Jethro blesses the mission. This is part 2 in our lesson. This is from Exodus 3:1-10. In the middle of Moses' normal workday, God showed up with a totally different plan. No matter where we are or how we got there, God can find us and send us on a special assignment. I love this. And here is now Moses is out in his normal workday. He's tending the flocks, and just every day he's been doing this. And every day, I wonder if he has to look over his shoulder. Does he look and think, are they having APB out for me? Are they going to find me today? Because what I've done, the crimes I've committed, and that's what he thought they're going to. I don't know what he was thinking, but the Lord knew right where he was, and he had a plan. In the middle of that normal work day, and that's the way it is so much of the time, it's just maybe an ordinary day. You're just serving the Lord, just an ordinary day, and all of a sudden something happens, and this is where it was here. Moses had lost his position of influence, or had he? And said it looked like he didn't have any position really. He's a shepherd, and they're considered in Egypt, that's one of the lowest jobs you can have. But said sometimes God pulls his people out of active service for extra leadership training. Isn't that just like the Lord, to prepare you? It's not that you can trust in yourself. It's just at all. It's not that. We can only accomplish things if the Lord helps us, and as we let him guide us and help us. So we know that it's like in this case, he was learning humility. He was the big guy before. He had such authority, and now here he is, he's a fugitive. They're after him. So I don't know if he constantly had to look over his shoulder, but he was so far away, he thought he maybe did have some comfort. But we can be certain of one thing: he did learn humility. There was no arrogance. There was a humility. And yet this man, he recognized when people were being wronged, and he was there to do something. He wasn't one that would sit back and say, I wish somebody would do something. Somebody needs to do something. Maybe somebody would. He would step up and do the right thing. And I think based on what he had done, how that he had murdered that man, I think now he was very cautious before he did things. he recognized the trouble that got him in, and I think he rethought that and began to think, I want to be cautious now. I want to be very careful. Well, here he is out on this day. The Bible tells us that Moses was very humble. He was more humble than any other person on earth. He had to go through some things to get him there. He recognized that he needed help. But he was out just a normal day, and now that he was just out there tending the sheep. And the end of this season in Moses' life was marked by a unique encounter with God. While he was tending Moses' sheep in the wilderness, a rugged, rocky place, more than a sand-filled desert. I think that's important to mention that. You think it's just a desert, flat desert, but it said it was different. It was a rugged, rocky place, more than a sand-filled desert. Moses reached Mount Sinai, a location that would be vitally important later in Exodus. He was amazed when he saw what? A bush that was on fire, but it wasn't burning up. Now, I'm told, whether it's true or not, I am told that there the fire is so hot that sometimes they have bushes that will catch on fire and just burn up, that it does happen. But this one, whether that was the case or it wasn't, this one didn't burn up. And so it attracted his attention. And said, speaking to Moses out of the flames, God called him to deliver the Israelites, identifying himself for the first time as Yahweh. Well, I'm going to tell you, that was something that was attracted his attention. He probably was riveted to it. He couldn't take his eyes off of it. And it mentions here, it is not surprising that God chose the medium of fire when appearing to Moses. And later said God led his people in a pillar of fire. And at the consecration of Aaron his sons, fire blazed forth from the Lord's presence and consumed the burnt offering. Went on to read then, at the dedication of Solomon's temple, fire flashed down from heaven. Imagine that. My. Hundreds of years later, God sent tongues of fire to signify the manifest presence of the Holy Spirit, Acts 2 and 3. Praise the Lord. So from the burning bush, God called himself the God of Abraham. He spoke to Moses, this man that was a fugitive from the law. The Lord had a plan for him, and I call this a connection from above. I tell you what, freedom from slavery, the path was being cleared. I mean, God was on the move, and he had chosen him. So his skill set is it's being expanded here. The God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. He connected Moses' mission of deliverance from the Abrahamic covenant. God was about to free his people from slavery, clearing the path and to return to the land he had promised. And Moses was the one tasked with that mission. After what he had done, God's going to use him. Why, that man's he'll be killed. When God chooses you and has a plan, it's going to happen if you stay in his will. He was one of the biggest challenges that tells us missionaries face is leaving the familiar things when God calls them. And you hear missionaries say that when it is difficult sometimes, but yet they are called. I remember a missionary that we had recently, some months ago, and they said, we go because, why do we stay? Oh, we're sent. We're sent by God. And that's their heart, and that's where they want to be. They don't want to be anywhere else but in the will of God. People say, well, you could stay back here and you could send money to the mission. No, God's called us and we're going. We want to go. And they don't listen to what everybody else says. They listen to what God says. So after 40 years of security and hospitality among the Midianites, it was probably difficult for Moses to begin the journey back to Egypt. Now, he'd been 40 years, he accepted, I guess, being being out there with the sheep and all those flocks. He was used, but despite, if he had any doubts, he thought about going back, whatever. And some people still alive back there, and they'll recognize me, and I'll be in trouble, but God was clear. Now go. I will be with you as you speak, and I will instruct you in what to say. Exodus 4 and 12. God said, you don't have to worry about it. I'm with you. I'm going with you. So he talked to Jethro about his encounter with God and said the Bible does not record the conversation. It can be tempting to speculate facts about it, but the truth is we simply don't know. We just know Moses simply asked Jethro to allow him to return to Egypt and said he could have been telling him he wanted to check on his fellow Israelites, and admitted, I don't even know if they are still alive. And the father-in-law was willing to. He was an honest man. Instead of there was a man named Laban that wasn't honest, we remember in the Bible, but when Jacob was departing from his own father-in-law, Laban, he was a crook, But the thing of it was, this man was different. mentions here the text is possibly comparing this episode to Moses' flight from Pharaoh 40 years earlier, when he certainly did not leave in peace. What is the point? Moses had matured. Moses was a different man. And he had been out, and he had plenty of time to think. He had plenty of time to the Lord had helped him with it. He was a very humble man. The Lord had really, and Michael, glad to have you on tonight. So he could make calculated, measured decisions, securing the blessing of an authority figure while also following the Lord's direction. He had matured, and he'd seen where his aggressiveness, and he just would leap to do something. He wouldn't stop and think it through. This had gotten him into trouble. Well, now he was different. It was really different now. He had really matured, and he was ready to carry out God's mission of deliverance. And as I talked about Jethro, when he said, as a leader of the Midianites, Jethro understood the importance of tribal bonds. So he sent Moses on his way with these words, "Go in peace." And it says, too, he appears to have had no assurance that Moses was on a mission from God or that he intended to return. But he had enough respect for his son-in-law to give a simple, trusting assent. There again, this was the Lord directing him. And so God reassured Moses that all those who wanted to kill you have died. He knew that Moses was really concerned about, and he should have been. But to calm some of his apprehension, Moses may have been feeling about returning to Egypt. So he wanted to calm him down. He said, everybody that was out to kill you, they're gone, that they've died. So Moses took along his wife and Zipporah and their 2 sons, Gershom and Eliezer, and they followed God's direction. They journeyed toward Egypt to undertake the mission that Moses had been given. And our lesson brings out that Moses carried the staff of God, with which he would perform the miraculous signs of God. I mean, that God was going to empower him. It wasn't going to be him alone. In part 3, Jethro gives leadership advice. Moses and Jethro are united. Now, we're going to skip across here. Our lesson skips across to several months, past the plagues and the first Passover and the parting of the Red Sea. The Israelites are no longer slaves in Egypt. They're out of that. They've eaten manna from heaven. They've drunk water from a rock and have witnessed a miraculous victory over the Amalekites. They've now reached Mount Sinai, where God would reveal himself to them in the same location Moses had first encountered him. But first, Moses was about to have a family reunion. You know, during Moses' conflict with Pharaoh, his wife and 2 sons had been sent back to live with Jethro. Probably Moses was wanting them to be safe. He felt like it was better probably for them to not be. He didn't want them in danger at all. But now they've been brought back, as Jethro had brought Zipporah, his wife, and his sons, Gershom and Eliezer, back to Moses and at the Israelite campsite near Mount Sinai. So the family, they all got together. They greeted them. They were so happy that they could be back together. And Moses began to tell of many of the miracles that the Lord had done to show that the Israelites, people, that you can trust me, God. You can just that God, the mighty God, He is able. He will help. He is the one that can help us. So it was really a marvelous time how the Lord was moving. He has rescued Israel from the powerful hand of Egypt. I know now that the Lord is greater than all other gods. Yes, amen. So Jethro trusted and believed in Moses. He was convinced, and Moses was convinced, and Jethro was convinced, his father-in-law. And it said Jethro's statement of faith summarized the events of the previous chapters, providing an outside witness that these amazing accounts were true. He took a step further and brought a burnt offering and sacrifices to God. And notice, so the universal name for God, Elohim, rather than Yahweh, used. Some believe that this is because Jethro was relating to God as an outsider rather than an Israelite, although he is not condemned for this. In fact, Aaron and all the elders of Israel came out and joined him in a sacrificial meal in God's presence. They were honoring the Lord. A great time was happening. You know, the Jethro here realized that his son-in-law was really, God had changed and things were moving. So Jethro has some advice. So now we move along to Exodus chapter 18, verses 13 through 27. And said it talks about the book of Proverbs is full of sayings about seeking wise counsel. Get all the advice and instruction you can so you'll be wise the rest of your life. This is Proverbs 19 and 20. I believe that is. Okay. And fools think their own way is right, but the wise listen to others. That's in Proverbs 12 and 15. But long before these bits of wisdom were collected for us, Moses had already learned the value of listening to good advice. His father-in-law, sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, when you're right on top of a situation, you can't really see it clearly. Sometimes somebody that's not directly involved, they can see things we don't see, and they can give some really, really powerful advice to us that we call, what we refer to as sage advice. That can really save us a lot and lots of trouble. So it's good to do that. I'm thankful that we have. You can think of people right now in your life probably that you were so glad when they stepped in, when you were maybe making a decision and you said, this is what I believe I'm going to do, and they'll say, well, you know what? And they'll point out something to you hadn't even noticed, you hadn't thought about. And you're so thankful that they were willing to speak up. There are people later that may say something, well, I wanted to say something, but I didn't want to make you mad. And maybe they had some really sage advice that you needed. So I'm thankful for people that obey the Lord and they honor the Lord. And you know what Jethro noticed here, he thought, my son-in-law is out here, and he's having to stay out here all the time, and he's going through all of this with these people. They're having, anytime you have people, you're going to have times, you're going to have conflicts, you're going to have things to resolve. And said, this man, he's thinking how exhausting it is, and he was helping him to see that you need to select some leaders to judge the people. And he said they could just bring the most difficult cases to you. He said, you're wearing yourself out. Why, you're exhausting yourself. And he recognized he needs to do something. And Jethro also suggested the qualities that Moses should look for in his delegates was capable, honest men who fear God and hate bribes. Hate bribes. I tell you what, in the book of Proverbs, you'll read about bribes. And one man I heard one time say, why aren't bribes mentioned all the time? Why? Because it's what many people are, they fall to is bribes. And so it mentions too that in 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 13 and Titus 1, 6 through 9, these requirements call to mind Paul's list of qualifications for church leaders. So when Moses had asked permission to return to Egypt, Jethro had simply responded, go in peace, in Exodus 4 and 18. And when Jethro offered leadership advice, Moses displayed the same level of trust, humbly following his father-in-law's advice. It was so much better now. He was relieved. He wasn't spending all the time. Carol, good to have you on. Carol, I just want to say this right quick. We had an amazing time today at our anniversary, our 50th anniversary celebration that the church gave us. There are so many things I could say, and absolutely, I was so overwhelmed. I couldn't hardly keep from crying. I was just so moved at how many came, and it was just tremendous. And I know you had wanted to be there, and I'm sorry you didn't get to be, but there are some pictures of that our pastor has put on the church page and also on his personal page. He's under Larry Thoma, Thoma. Okay, so now back to our lesson. And so now that we see that Jethro, Moses had realized he had good advice. He had a lot of wisdom, and he listened to him. He applied it, and he was being helped. And it wasn't that Jethro, his father-in-law, was turning him, just like turning him, whichever one, just you do what I say. It wasn't that. He just saw that he was overworking. Here he was. He wasn't getting anybody to help him, and here he was listening to all these people all day long, every day. You're going to wear yourself out. Wise, effective leaders today are certainly familiar with the concept of delegation. There's some things that you can delegate, and some things you don't delegate. And I know I heard one man say one time, I like to be the boss so I can just delegate. Well, no, you have things to do too. And if that's your attitude, I don't do anything, I just delegate. No, that's not. Wise, effective leaders today are certainly familiar with the concept of delegation. Yes, they are, but there has to be wisdom in that. Like Moses, the best leaders are open to advice from others, especially those with experience and proven effectiveness like Jethro. Everybody needs that kind of a person in their life. You can probably think right now, I've said this before and I'll say it again, it's important. Be careful who you go to. You don't want to go to somebody that they're always going to agree with you, whatever you say. And I had a friend that one thing I could count on her, she would tell me the truth. Now, and she wasn't mean about it, but if she didn't think it was right, and she would tell me why, and it made sense. She, she had experienced a lot of things I had not, and I appreciated it. So we need to appreciate those. And I'm thankful we have the Holy Spirit to lead us. He will put people in our path. And He will put us in somebody's path to help them too. We can be a help to others. what's our lesson asks, what is God saying to us? Even though God handpicked him to lead Israel, Moses still benefited from the advice of an experienced leader. You know, it was important that Moses didn't have this attitude. I don't want to hear from you. God called me. I know what I'm doing. I'll do it myself. I'll do it my way. You can get in trouble with that kind of an attitude. It's so important that we, you know, we're all made out of the same stuff, flesh and blood. And we need others to help us along the way. And I'm thankful that we're able to help somebody see something maybe they don't see, don't recognize because we're older, or maybe we've been through something like that. We can reach out and help them. We can do it in love and quietness, instead of jumping on them and telling them how foolish they are. And that's crazy if you do that. That's a goofy mistake. Don't go there. Don't do that. If you talk to them like that, that's not good. But if we can, in kindness, and say, I've noticed this, and I know one time I went through a situation like this, and I was wondering, I just want to mention this. You know, just if people know you and they trust you, oftentimes they will listen. But even though God, our writer said, even though God had handpicked him to lead Israel, Moses still benefited from the advice of an experienced leader who wasn't even an Israelite. Most leaders receive advice, solicited or not, but Moses was humble enough to listen carefully, recognize wise, godly counsel when he heard it, and put it into practice. Just because somebody has been at it longer doing something, they're not always the wisest. That's why it's so important to seek God and to know, Lord, who do I in this? And I think that the Lord can direct us to who to go to talk to. And also, there are people that may come to us and they're sincere and they say, I was praying today and the Lord just impressed me to tell you. And maybe some little tidbit, and it's just what you needed. God sent them, and they didn't say, well, I'm afraid I'll say the wrong thing. Well, what if you are afraid of that? You probably won't. That's what. But just step out and do the will of God and just honor the Lord. And I tell you what, he's going to help us. We're here to help each other, not point out everybody's errors and faults. And we all can know we have them. Now, in living it out, ministry in action, number one, make conscious choices to honor and obey God in such a way that those in authority over you can bless you and rejoice. 2, with God's guidance, seek out people who are willing to give you godly advice, then prayerfully listen to what they say. And 3rd, are you struggling with unsustainable demands on your time and energy? Strategize ways to delegate your task and avoid burnout. You know, I believe this can happen sometime in ministry. It can happen to anybody, whether it's ministry or not. You can actually become so busy and so overloaded that literally, the body just cannot take it. It's overload. I remember a minister that they traveled in adult evangelism. They were booked way ahead, and he finally had to go to the doctor. Something was wrong. The doctor told him, you're going to have a heart attack or a stroke if you do not take some time. And I think he required him, it ordered him to take a time off and to give his body time to refresh. And just, it was, I think sometimes, and you know, we think, well, but I've got to work for God because, you know, he could come any day, and we're thinking, you know, while I'm young now, I want to do this. I want to do before my strength is gone. Well, if we don't take care of our body, we may not be able to do what we're supposed to do. But so I just believe the Lord can guide us and direct us. We are strategically placed, time, primed, and equipped if we follow the Lord daily. And just pray the Lord blesses you and helps you, and hope that you will be in the house of God tomorrow. Carol, I hope you're letting me know if you're feeling better. I want to know that, if you can put that in the notes, because we want to, in the comments, because we want to pray for you and keep praying the Lord will help you and guide you. So our lesson, Jethro, Moses' counselor and father-in-law. Remember, our special speaker tomorrow is Reverend Dr. Adonna Otwell, and she teaches at Nelson University in Waxahachie, Texas. It was formerly called, it was Southwestern Assemblies of God College, Southwestern Assemblies of God University, and the new name went into effect August 1, and it is named after the founder of the school. The first president, the founder of the school was P.C. Nelson, and so that's where they get the name Nelson University. And so that will be at 10:45, but Sunday school begins at 9:45. All right, you be blessed. We look forward to seeing you next Saturday night. But hopefully it'll be much earlier than this. But this has been a big day. 2 to 4 was our the special time that they had for us that today for our golden anniversary. It was terrific. May the Lord bless you and keep you. We love you. We'll see you next week, the Lord willing.